Good morning, everyone. In opening the meeting, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting of the West Australian Planning Commission is being live streamed, and I welcome everyone that is logged into the day. The meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website or YouTube. I advise observers that members may refer to technical devices such as phones and laptops at the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. In opening the meeting, I also acknowledge that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. Pay our respects to elders past and present. Are there any applications for leave of absence, please? No, thank you. We have attending in person today myself, the Deputy Chairperson, Commissioner Cole, Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Bennett, Commissioner Brooks, Commissioner Heron, Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Lakey. We have apologies this morning from Commissioner Sandry, and we are awaiting the arrival of Bennett. Observing today, we have Damien Hills from the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation and Justin McCurdy representing the Transport portfolio. I move to item 1.3, disclosures of interest. I have a declaration of interest from Commissioner Hall. It's a perceived impartiality interest in that his employer, the City of Greater Geraldton, is listed as having received a grant from the Coast West program. And that is item 4.10 on the agenda, which is an item to note the progress of the Coast WA program achievements. And I have determined that Commissioner Hall can remain. I have a declaration of interest from myself. It's a declaration of representation for item 4.6, the potential GBRS amendment pre-lodgement request, in as much as I, together with departmental officers, met with the landowners and their consultants, of course, of my role as chairman of the commission. Are there any other declarations of interest, please? No, thank you very much. We move to item 1.4, declaration of consideration. Could all members indicate they have read the agenda, please? Thank you. And we move to item 1.5, confirmation of minutes of the meeting of the 11th of September. Could I have a move and a seconder that we adopt those minutes, please? Moved by Commissioner Hall, seconded by Commissioner Brooks. No dissent. Thank you very much. We move to item 2, deputations and presentations. And I'll hand over to Irene to welcome the patients that are online.
Welcome everyone that is present in order to make a deputation today, either in person or via Zoom. You will be invited to join the table or promoted to a panelist via Zoom to deliver your deputation. You have been advised of your allocated time, which will be managed by a timer, which will appear on the screen. The tone is not working in this moment, so just watch the timer on the screen. I will now admit the first deputation, Samantha. Good morning, Samantha. Can you please turn on your microphone? If you can hear us. And your camera. Good morning, Samantha. Can you please speak so we know you can hear us? Can you please turn on your video, Samantha, if you can hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
thank you. And we can now see you on the screen.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. Sorry about that, bit of a technical glitch.
You can,
Should
I
I
start
begin?
the deputation? Thank you.
Right. Thank you for this opportunity to provide the City of South Perth's position on the proposed MRS amendment for Lot 1, Labouchere Road, South Perth. The City would like to reiterate that it is in principle supportive of future redevelopment of the subject site, providing it can be achieved at an appropriate scale and with appropriate land uses. On this basis, it is willing at an officer level to support the proposal to rezone the site urban from its current reclassification as Parks and Recreation Reserve under the MRS, contingent upon the concurrent amendment of Local Planning Scheme Number 7 to reflect private community purposes rather than the proposed centre zoning. This is considered a more appropriate zone for the site. As outlined in correspondence to the Department in June this year, we do not support rezoning to the centre zone or inclusion of the site in the South Perth Activity Centre Plan area with a centre zoning, as this does not align with the future designation of the land in either the Central Sub-Regional Planning Framework or the approved local planning strategy. We also note that the applicant has not provided supporting information in terms of a needs assessment or net benefit test as required by SPP 4.2 activity centres for an out-of-centre assessment. We see this as a significant deficiency in the proposal. The site is not identified as an urban corridor in the Central Sub-Regional Planning Framework. It is identified as part of the Green Network. These objectives include preserving and enhancing green networks of parks, rivers, sport and recreation areas, facilities for active open space, conservation and biodiversity areas, and areas with a high level of tree canopy coverage considered important for the health and well-being of the community. This has been further reinforced by designation in the city's recently approved local planning strategy, which has identified the site for parks and recreation. The more detailed planning in the strategy notes that a number of urban corridors identified in the framework do not form part of the city's managed growth strategy to accommodate its infill targets. The specific reasons for exclusion include that other areas have been identified in the managed growth strategy to address dwelling growth expectations of Perth and Peel at 3.5. This corridor is served by public transport, but not to the same extent as the more prominent corridors such as Canning Highway or Manning Road, and the corridor is not identified as high priority route in Perth and Peel Transport Plan. The site has not been identified as part of the city's designated growth areas, and more intensive development beyond that associated with private recreation purposes or other uses complementary to the adjoining golf course is considered contrary to both the strategy and the Central Sub-Regional Planning Framework. For the same reasons, the City does not support the proposal to include the subject site within the South Perth ACP, as it is separated from other development areas by, for example, a 6-hectare area of land forming Richardson Park and is adjacent to residential zone sites of R25, R40 and R60. The boundary for the South Perth ACP was carefully selected to achieve specific planning outcomes, and the subject site was considered and not selected. Inclusion at this point is inconsistent with these previous decisions, and it is not supported by the local planning framework. While the City does not support rezoning to centre under the local planning scheme, it is supported at an officer level of rezoning it to private community purpose. This would allow more limited but suitable ranges of uses. Furthermore, the scheme provides more detailed planning to occur through a local development plan to vary default provisions if required, which will allow the Royal Perth Golf Club to consider redevelopment opportunities into the future. In conclusion, I'd like to thank the members for their time.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Commission members, are there any questions, please, of the City of South Perth? Commissioner Bennett, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Samantha, for the deputation. I understand your comments regarding the concurrent amendment and the request for the public purposes reserve. Have you had conversations with the applicant around a separate town planning scheme amendment and what the city may require if it was going to be a concurrent amendment?
What was the question? I cut out then.
Sorry,
So what would be the process?
No, have you had conversations with the applicant regarding a separate town planning scheme amendment should the application not be a concurrent amendment?
I haven't been privy to any previous conversations. I would imagine that staff have had a conversation around that. Our preference would be to run it concurrently because it provides a greater efficiency and certainty of outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. Samantha, I just wanted to understand, in terms of the private community private community purpose zone,
Yes.
can I just, and so is that a zone that currently exists within your scheme and you have other properties that are currently have that zoning? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And can I also then confirm that your intention would be, is that that would be the interim zoning until such time as a separate proposal were to be undertaken should there wish to be further redevelopment? Is that correct?
Our preference would be for that zoning, which then allows a variety of uses to be explored into the future via an LDP. Yes, but not an interim zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, please? No, thank you very much, Samantha.
Thank you for your time.
Our next deputation is on the same item, item 4.2, and we're going to welcome Michael Wilcock from Taylor Burrell Barnett, speaking in support of the recommendation.
Good morning, Michael. Can you please turn on your microphone? Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the Chair and Commissioners for the opportunity to present in support of the Amherst Amendment 1423 for Lot 1, Labouchere Road. On behalf of our client, which is the Royal Perth Golf Club, we welcome the final consideration of the amendment to propose to rezone the club's freehold site to urban. The club supports the concurrent rezoning under the city's scheme to a private community purposes zone, as this was discussed with DPLH officers prior to advertising, and it was discussed with the City of South Perth during advertising with Donna Shaw and Jessica Burbeck at the city. This amendment provides a region zone to facilitate the future use and development over our client's freehold site. This is consistent with orderly and proper planning and provides a suitable framework with minimal cost, burden of administration or time on the city and the club itself. From advertising, there were 19 submissions. Most had no comments to make. 6 objections indicated the club shouldn't profit from the use of their own freehold land, which is not a material planning consideration. The city's submission, we had an opportunity to view when it was submitted prior to advertising, and the advertising submission that they then put forward during advertising, indicating that they were supportive of the urban zone contingent on a private community purpose zone, which from the club's perspective relates more to what their site is used at the moment, not necessarily what they will be aspiring to look at in the future. And that kind of was conveyed to the Commission in my previous submission in February, where they're looking at alternative methods and opportunities to diversify the land use and development potential of their site to ensure that their long-term feasibility and viability as a club is maintained and optimised at a future point. So we have considered their suggested zone with respect to the city's position that they've just conveyed. The club does probably more so think of it as an interim zone. The discussions with the city previously indicated that there could be support for a local development plan, which is a provision under that zoning to guide development in the future. And in consultation with the city offered that other modifications to the zone could be contemplated in the future on the basis that a more cohesive sort of package of information was prepared. They indicated that shadow diagrams, height diagrams, wind analysis, all those other need assessments that they spoke to would help package up what the club might be looking at in the future. Having said that, the club has expressly said to the DPLH through its submission and to me through to you that they don't really have a clear vision at this stage. So in terms of trying to predict what might happen in the next 30 years, they would take the opportunity to internally review what they want to do and then come forward publicly to the city or to the DPLH at a later date. So we appreciate that the amendment will rezone the site and consolidates the DPLH's years of work and efforts on this very small property, and we look forward to a favourable consideration of the amendment and concurrent rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Commission members, are there any questions, please, with Michael? I think that clarifies a lot of well before. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
We move to item 2.3, the deputation on item 4.5, the potential MRS amendment for Hazelmere Lakes Precinct. And we're joined by Joshua Carmody and Jane Evershed.
No, just me.
Just you?
And we've also got Alan, so it's a deputation request.
That's the next deputation, that's correct. So Joshua, could you join us at the table?
Would be able to do it together.
Oh, sure, by all means. You're joined by Alan Sharman, Paul Kedding.
Alan will come up and speak. Alan will speak first.
Thank you. Two deputations were approved and you're speaking together. You've got 6 minutes in which to address the committee. There is a timer there. If you could just be aware of the time that's taken, please. Thank you. Alan?
Me first. Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I'll probably try and put a bit of a personal slant on where we're at. The Hazelmere Lakes Action Group Committee was elected at a meeting of residents in October 2019. All 18 residents listed on our rezoning advice have financially contributed to the process based on the availability of their land, excluding wetland areas. Unfortunately, with further technical reporting required, enthusiasm for the project is waning and financial burden is falling on fewer residents. There is a financial inequity given that the adjacent developments have had the luxury of government-funded support. Given the quantity of surrounding developments, we believe there must be a plethora of data available to provide some relief or at least rationalise our costs. A bit nervous. The original survey cadastre of our project area with no defining boundaries around the wetlands was an error and has been the underlying source of our issues for many years. The Hazelmere Lakes Business Park was set up as an actual business venture and did progress to the environmental reporting and concept plan stage. Unfortunately, one of the members fell very ill and the process was no longer being driven. TPS 9 and 15 resulted in large swathes of Hazelmere rural land, including wetlands, being rezoned industrial. This has initiated the degradation of the wetlands. In 1992, the City of Swan confirmed a management plan for the remaining lakes was to be established. That management plan has never eventuated. From a personal perspective on amenity, a couple of residents have been in their property since 1980. One of them started to develop a small island refuge in the northern Hazelmere Lake to protect native wildlife from fox and cats. The City of Swan served notice on head to cease all activity of the lake, highlighting the usability of this land. 3 generations of Miles have lived on their property since 1945. Sue's mother had one wish to see the issues, but the lakes resolved within her lifetime. Sue is now concerned she too will not see any resolution in her lifetime. Greg and Sue's outlook is now the Abernathy Road overpass. There is appreciation within our group that the omission of the Hazelmere Lakes precinct from the 2011 HEASP was also an error. Understanding this is a widely shared view is one of the motivating forces that has encouraged many of our group to persist with this process. I can go into how the lakes have been degraded and where the Northern Lake, for example, was some of the developments around the Northern Lake were directed to redivert their stormwater away from the lakes precinct, as well as the airport is currently redirected all their stormwater away from the lakes as well. This further contributes to damaging the wetlands. That's it, I guess.
I might, is that right if I present directly? Then we'll
Yes, thank you, Josh.
questions. All right, so I think Alan's expressed some frustrations that the landowners group has felt over the last few decades. I guess I'll speak now in probably I'll try to narrow some of that issues down to the decision that you'll be making today. We obviously are speaking in support of their proposal to rezone the Hazelmere Lakes precinct from rural, the MRFs. Their intention is to use the process to transfer the wetlands into public ownership and to allow for the development of dry industry on the balance of their land. So the Hazelmere Lakes is this tiny pocket now of rural zoned land, which is surrounded by the Hazelmere Enterprise Industrial Area. It's encircled by future road, rail and freight infrastructure, and it's also directly below the flight path of the new Perth Airport. So it's abundantly clear that the lakes can't continue as this isolated island of rural residential properties, and yet the presence of the mapped wetlands within the precinct has put it in the too hard basket for decades. In 2014, following advocacy by ourselves, the WAPC did include Hazelmere Lakes precinct into the Hazelmere Enterprise Structure Plan, and they recognised that the current rural residential uses are not the highest and best use for the land. And they also recognised that it was necessary to secure public ownership. But the frustration I think Alan is expressing here is that unlike every other precinct, including other precincts containing mapped wetlands, this was the only one that received no certainty regarding the future land use within the precinct. So, for example, under the same structure plan, the Helena River precinct was also identified as containing environmental sensitivities, and yet that didn't prevent it being identified as a future light industrial precinct, with the environmental analysis deferred to the local structure planning stage. Furthermore, those other precincts have had MRS amendments progress under government leadership and resourcing, whilst the Hazelmere Lakes precinct has been left to the local landowners to resolve. And as Alan is saying, what this has meant in practice is that the landowners within that wider precinct of the wider area of Hazelmere, who are actually responsible for the drainage flows into the lakes, either away from or into, they've been allowed to develop, whilst the landowners who actually abut the lake and receive the impacts have been unable to. It's somewhat of a bizarre situation. Now, the landowners accept that they need to fund technical reporting. They've done so, 200,000 or more to date. But the difference here, and what we're focusing on here, is that they're the only landowners within the Hazelmere area who are being asked to spend that money up front without a clear in-principle support for the urbanisation of their land. So all we're asking this morning, this is pre-lodgement advice, all we're asking this morning is that they be given the same clarity and certainty that's afforded to the other landowners within HESAP. For a client with limited resources, mostly retirees, tangible progress is critical, and it's within the WAPC's discretion to recognise this by deferring as many matters as possible to be resolved at later stages of the planning process. So our request this morning, our request this morning is simply that the WAPC provides a clear statement of support for the transition of the precinct towards non-residential development, likely dry industry, and a clear pathway forward in terms of planning process for the amendment. Thank you. We're available to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Joshua and Alan. Commission members, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and fully appreciate the situation you're in. In terms of the proposal that had been put forward was for an urban zoning, and there has obviously been discussion around more of an industrial type use going into that area. Is industrial the intended out end use, or is it you're wanting to have more flexibility in that?
The discussion so far has been dry industry. That's what the demand is within the area, and that's what's been put forward in other transitional precincts between residential and the general industry at the centre of the Hazelmere precinct. That kind of is going general industry, dry industry, residential.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification, I just understand what it's dry industry.
So warehouses, logistics, so no intensive sort of emissions or impacts, or fairly lower employment, larger areas, less servicing and infrastructure required.
Generally, Commissioner Hall, the dry industry in this locality doesn't require sewer. That's why it's called dry industry. Joshua, on the plan that you submitted or the proposed rezoning, you've identified the wetlands, which you've referred to as mapped wetlands. have you included a buffer within proposed P&R area?
I guess part of the process here is seeking advice. There's a buffer assessment hasn't been completed yet. A evaluation of the wetlands was submitted. Part of the flexibility we're probably looking for is for the buffer to be contained either on private land or within the mapped wetland zone. There would a full buffers to include the buffer zone within the ceded land would sterilise a number of the properties that would be affected. So they're willing to give up the wetland, but the buffer zone for some of them would make it, they wouldn't be able to proceed with.
Thank you. Commission members, any further questions, please? Thank you, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. So just to follow on from that, just to understand those buffers a little bit more, typically the interface to those buffers and wetlands is via a road interface rather than lots back. Have you considered a subdivision pattern and a resultant development area with a road interface, and is that feasible outcome for the residents?
Yes, a road interface would be feasible. Alternative interface would be necessary. If you have a look at the sort of concept plan, you'll see there just wouldn't be space.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? No, thank you very much, Joshua. Thank you, Ellen. Final deputation is on item 4.6, the potential Greater Bunbury Region Scheme Amendment pre-lodgement request. And I welcome Mr. Greg Rowe and David Marana to we have a PowerPoint presentation that will appear on the screen. And David just asked for the slides to be advanced.
Thank you.
When you're ready, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners and staff. I'm joined by Mr. Greg Rowe, and along with myself, will be available to answer questions following the presentation. Next slide, please. We appreciate the opportunity to present this deputation in relation to this matter, which is a pre-lodgement advice request in relation to a proposed GBRS amendment for the Victoria Urban Precinct. Road Group acts for the proponent Lily Star Proprietary Limited, who is the majority landowner within the precinct. Given this is a confidential item, we're not privy to the officer's recommendation on this matter, but to avoid doubt, we are speaking in support of the proposed GBRS amendment. For context, this slide illustrates the prominent location of the site. The eastern entry to Bunbury Port is in a harbour is located off to the northwest, and the site's outlined in black line work. By means of background, in 2011, WAPC supported a proposal to initiate an amendment with various lots within this precinct to urban deferred. The amendment was ultimately refused consent to advertise by the Minister for Planning. It was noted, however, that the WAPC would consider an alternative proposal for the site subject to further detailed planning being undertaken. And since this time, extensive planning and technical investigation has been progressed over the site to address the previously identified development constraints. A comprehensive proposal to rezone the land to urban was submitted in early 2023, which was accompanied by a draft structure plan showing a future service commercial outcome on the land. Next slide, please. Planning for the Glen Iris urban area to the south has also been progressed, with Glen Iris district structure planning. The subject site is in the northern part of that, and there's a notation that refers to the port interface area subject to further planning. Next slide, please. The Port of Bunbury Master Plan was also updated in 2023, and a transport commercial zone is identified fronting Forest Highway within that plan, which we say is entirely compatible with the proposal for service commercial uses on these adjoining private land holdings, just in the southeast corner. The subject site's identified with the Port Master Plan to the northwest. The urban rezoning proposal was referred for preliminary comment, and in response to comments received and with encouragement from the department, a revised proposal was submitted. This introduced the proposed urban deferred zoning over the majority of the site with a 2 hectare area of regional open space to conserve identified western ringtail possum habitat. Proposal is illustrated on the following slide. That's the next one. It's the existing zoning, rural zoning, port installations reserved to the northwest and the urban area to the southeast of Forest Highway. And then perhaps if we go to the next slide, that's illustrating the proposed urban deferred area with the regional open space to the northeast. So the revised proposal in this form was again referred for preliminary agency comment, the result of which being the Public Transport Authority confirmed an urban deferred zoning would be supported on the basis it wouldn't compromise options plan for the Bunbury rail project, the rail project. Southern Ports Authority confirmed an urban deferred zoning would be supported. The City of Bunbury supported an urban deferred zone and regional open space reserve. And the DPLH's various teams, but primarily the Regional South and Coastal Policy team, were supportive of an urban deferred zoning. The EPA services team supported including regional open space to conserve the possum habitat. And so the service commercial outcome intended for the precinct under the local planning scheme is illustrated on the following slide, if we can advance to the next one. And just to conclude, to facilitate the formal progression of a GBRS amendment, the WAPC's pre-lodgement advice on the proposal is favourable advice from the Commission will enable our client to proceed with greater confidence in that strategic attributes of the site are acknowledged, planning merit of the proposal is recognised, and ultimately a service commercial land use outcome for the precinct is supported. Thank you for considering the deputation. Happy to respond to questions should they arise.
Thank you very much, David. Commission members, are there any questions, please, of David or Greg? Very much. Thank you. Now move to item 3, non-confidential items for discussion, decision or noting. And item 3.1 is the WA Planning Manual, non-residential car parking rates in Perth and Peel for final approval, joined by Elise Saraceni and Seth Cohen-Radisevich. Elise, is there anything you wish to add to the report?
No, just that this one was the one that was deferred last month by the Commission to enable us to send notifications to those stakeholders who submitted during consultation, which we did, and we've heard nothing back, which is a great sign. So this is just some interim guidance which will form part of the WA Planning Manual and is really intended to assist local governments in reviewing their car parking rates as part of a policy review or a scheme review process in the interim while we do some more intensive and exhaustive data collection as part of stage 2 of this project.
Thank you very much. Commission members, are there any questions, please? Could I have a mover and a seconder that we adopt the recommendation, please? Moved by Commissioner Hall, seconded by Commissioner Lake. Consent. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move to item 4, confidential items for decision or noting, and the Commission will now move the consideration of those items, and in doing so I seek a mover and a seconder to resolve that the meeting be closed to members of the public. By Commissioner Brooks, seconded by Commissioner Bennett. No dissent. Thank you.
Take your leave.